Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you from NASA Community College on 90.3 WHPC. We're also streaming. I tell you, I can't believe this. You know, it's so cold out there. I'm not sure if my mouth caught up with my thoughts. So we're streaming out there on nccradio.com. .org, that is. nccradio.org. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. This program is repeated Sundays at 11 p.m. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This, of course, all depends when you're listening or watching. I can't believe it. I nearly forgot to tell everybody. You can see us live. I'm waving. I'm waving to all of our radio listening audience, and I'm saying hello to everybody on the world of Facebook Live, both at WHPC or at my own page at Anshul Perl, facebook.com, Anshul Perl. So good morning to Gene Brandonston. Good morning to everybody. Hello on the radio, hello online, and hello to the world. I'd like to first begin with some life lessons from the Torah portion that was read in the synagogues throughout the world. It's something very special to me. It's my bar mitzvah parsha. It means when I was bar mitzvah, that particular week, you read a certain section, and this is mine, Tetzaveh. And I want to say hello to Dr. Eitan Kelshevsky, who's back from Israel. Amazing, thank God. Thanks to the doctor. Looks like there's peace on the horizon. Thank you so much. And right now, you're calling us from Montana. Wow. Jeffrey Hirsch, unbelievable. Good morning to you and to everybody out there. What makes this Torah portion so significant is it's always read in proximity to the seventh day of Adar. What's so special? What's the seventh day of Adar? That's the birthday, as well as the Yortzeit, the day of passing of Moses himself. Something unique. There are very, very few people in Jewish history, but Moses stands as number one. He was born on the seventh day, and he passed away on the seventh day. And interestingly, Moses' name is absent throughout this portion of this Torah portion. The only one from the beginning of his birth till the end of the book of Numbers. Every week, his name is mentioned, every minute, a few times, 5 times, many times, and here we have his name on Tetzaveh missing. His name is not mentioned. Why? What could this be? The answer lies in an examination of the story of the golden calf. While Moses was atop the Mount Sinai, the people committed the terrible transgression of rejecting God and creating this calf-shaped statue which they worshipped. When God informed Moses of the people's mistake, sin, instead of storming down the mountain and yelling, "I've had it with you, you people, I'm out of here," how do you think Moses responded? He began to fiercely defend the people, passionately taking up their case. You know what he suggested? Listen, God says, let me destroy these people. They're no good. Let me create a new nation. Let me start all over from the beginning. It's not exactly the first time we've had that, right? Remember with the story of the flood? And God says, enough already with this generation, the huge flood, and then we start all over again. Well, sure enough, God said the same thing. These guys made a mistake with the golden calf. I'm going to start all over again. And your descendants, guys, as God spoke to Moses, says, you'll be the new Jewish people. Now imagine if God appeared to a rabbi today and said, hello, listen, I've come to the conclusion that all the Jewish people and all the congregations besides yours are wrong. You're the only one who knows what you're doing. I'm going to go with you only. Can you imagine such a calling? Many rabbis would likely be thrilled. Just joking. But what did Moses do? He flatly rejected this proposition. And he said, listen, hello, God, I refuse to be part of such an operation unless you forgive the people. I'm so serious about this that if you do not forgive them, erase me from your entire book, the book of the Torah. Unbelievable. I'm on the air. This is what Richard D. Rottenberg. Richard, you're the man. You're the man. Beautiful, beautiful. It was good to see you and your dear mother and the wonderful honoring of your parents that you stand up for. So back to our question. Moses says, hey, don't play around with me. Either you forgive my people, I'm out of here. Erase me from the book. Now remember, when a tzaddik, a completely righteous person, makes a statement, it has to be fulfilled, at least to some degree. So when Moses uttered those words, erase me from the Torah, even though it was a conditional demand, and even though God did in fact forgive the people, Moses' words had to be fulfilled. Therefore, his name is omitted from the portion of Tetzaveh. So that's why his name is missing over this incident. Okay, fine. This fierce defense of the people is unique to the character of Moses. He was this unwavering leader, devoted beyond any possible expectation, way above the call of duty. Moses, the greatest prophet and teacher of all time, was also the best friend of the Jewish people ever had. See, Moses' connection to the Torah is so profound that it's called Torah Moshe, the teachings of Moses. Moses took the Torah from heaven, from God who descended upon Mount Sinai and gave it to us. He was a bridge between heaven to earth. Following the giving of the Torah, Moses spent 40 years teaching the Torah. That's why it's called Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. The people of that generation were known as the generation of knowledge, Dor Deah. Moses was the greatest teacher who ever lived, and their knowledge of Torah was therefore exceptional. With all their needs taken care of by God in the desert, they did not have to go to work. Rather, they spent their days studying Torah and eating pizza. And what was Moses doing? He was teaching them. Now, comparing Moses to his brother Aaron, we see opposite roles. Aaron, the high priest, elevated the offerings of the Jewish people, presenting them to God. So, in a sense, Aaron helped the Jewish people with a connection to God that was instigated from below and directed to above. He uplifted them through the service in the tabernacles. Moses, on the other hand, helped the Jewish people by establishing a connection with God that went from above to below. He took the Torah from on high and brought it down to us. This is an amazing synergy of relationship, from above to below, from below to above. What does Moses mean? Surprisingly, it is of Egyptian origin. When Princess Bitya, or Batya, Pharaoh's daughter, discovered a basket floating on the Nile river, she opened and found it Moses, from whom spiritual light emanated. She was touched by the compassion. She took him and saved his life. Raising him as her own child, she named him Moses, saying, "For I drew him ki min hamayim mishisiu," for I drew him from the water. Now, the only thing that many people complain about is that he didn't have, Waze made by an Israeli company, because if he'd had the Waze, he would have the proper GPS. We wouldn't have ended up 40 years wandering around and then ending up as Dr. Kilshevsky in the world's worst neighborhood. Gewalt. Let's take a deep dive, so to speak, into the idea of Moses being drawn from the water. Right? So I'm going to ask you, why is Moses called Moses? Because, my dear friends, you all know the reason is. Because you can change our noses, but never our Moses. But seriously, according to the Hasidic teachings, which is based on Kabbalah, there are two worlds. There's the covered world, and there's the revealed world. The ocean symbolizes the covered world. The Talmud notes that everything on dry land also exists in the sea. There's plants, there's animals, there's an entire world underneath the water. especially those who go to Australia, other places, go snorkeling. Oh, to what they find over there. There's still people I know who wasted all their money, trying to bring up boats of lost treasures. Some Chweisverstatten over there in Jones Beach. In the ocean, however, everything is hidden beneath the water. Since we cannot see it, it is called the covered world and the world of concealment. In contrast, the revealed world is our physical world, the world of the dry land. Moses was not of our world. He was from the world of concealment. That is why he radiated light. He was from a higher realm, more angelic, more than human. He's associated with the water world. Princess Bettia drew him out of the water because he was a water creation. That means a heavenly being with such a lofty source. Moses was very uncomfortable in the world of revelation. He was more at home in heaven than he was on earth. Excuse me. He was more comfortable in the water, so to speak, than he was on dry land. That's the story now of why he was pulled out of the water. He was pulled into this world. This distinctive quality, being more celestial than terrestrial, enabled Moses to nourish and instill faith in God within the Jewish people. Therefore, he was called Raya Mehemna, which is Aramaic, which can be translated as a faithful shepherd, or a shepherd of faith. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses declares, "And now, O Israel, what does God, your Lord, ask of you? Kiyim liyira, only to fear the Lord, your God." And the Talmud famously asks, Kiyim liyira, only to fear God? Is fearing God such a small matter? For a human being, fearing God does not come naturally. It's easy for us to fear hurricanes, earthquakes, and the FBI. But fearing God is no small feat. Acquiring fear of heaven requires diligent effort, as explained by the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chassidus, in Tanya. So why then does the verse say, what's demanded of us is nothing more than to fear of heaven? Is fear of heaven no big deal? And the Talmud answers, yes, for Moses, it's not a big deal. For Moses, with his unique character, his nature, fearing God was natural. But wait a minute. This answer leads us to an even bigger question. When Moses says all God wants is that we should fear him, he's addressing everybody, every one of us. So how does it help us to know that for Moses, it was easy? For everyone else, it was a huge deal. The answer, says the Alter Rebbe, lies in the fact that there is a Moses in every generation. To acquire the fear of God, one must connect to the Moses of one's generation. Every generation has that style and that level of leader. And just like Moses was the shepherd of his people of his time, so to us in every generation. In a discourse, the Rebbe discusses this, that the same way that Moses was the leader of his generation, Mordechai led the generation during the Purim story. And the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yossi Yitzchak Schneerson, led his generation during his time. The previous Rebbe was so dedicated to his generation that he boldly refused to back down in the face of opposition. First it was with the Soviets in the 1920s, then the Nazis, and then the raging assimilation in America, even risking his own life and lives of his disciples. That, my friend, is a wake-up call to understanding what is a Jewish leader. Not only is there a Moses in every generation, but here comes the good news. Inside of every one of us watching and listening, and everyone out there, every one of us has a little Moses inside of us. That's the soul that we have, the neshama. And it comprises of 5 levels. 2 levels called chaya and yechida. They're the subconscious and the source of our faith. The highest level of the soul is the aspect of Moses, the faithful shepherd and the shepherd of faith. When we tap into the yechida, into the highest level of our personality, each of us can become a Moses. Moses teaches us to bring forth the inherent leadership qualities within each of us, the Moses within us. And I dare anybody listening or watching to say that they are not a leader in some form or fashion. We all are. We may not want to take on the responsibilities. We may want to hide. But the reality is we all carry amazing inherent leadership qualities. Now we understand what the Talmud says. Is fear of God no big deal? Yes, for Moses. Moses, within each of us, it's no big deal. Yes, we all have that inside of us. I bring to mind the words of Rabbi Dr. Lord Jonathan Sacks, of blessed memory, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain. He addressed the gathering at 770, the Chabad headquarters of Chabad in New York, during the week of Shiva observance, following the Rebbe's passing in 1994. Reflecting on his personal experience, Rabbi Sacks spoke about coming to the Rebbe as a young student and having his life transformed. I have met many leaders, he told the audience. Do you know what great leaders do? A great leader creates followers. The Rebbe is the only leader I met who creates not followers, but leaders. The Rebbe inspired me, he said, not to sell myself short, but to be a leader. That is precisely what a Moses does. Brings out the inherent leadership qualities within ourselves as well. The primary beneficiary of our leadership is ourselves. When we believe in ourselves and stop wasting time putting other people down, as I often sadly see, when people believe in themselves and take responsibility for their own life, maximizing their own potential, and acknowledging that our past accomplishments are not enough, we motivate ourselves to achieve more. When individuals reported their achievements to the Rebbe, he invariably encouraged them to do more. That's great, he would say, but don't be satisfied with that. Go out tomorrow and do more. We must strive to become the leaders we have the potential to be and actively work to transform the world because we can. Yes, we can. Good morning to Laura May and to Linda Zellickson and everybody out there. And Stacy Hirsch Lambert, yes, thank you. Let me tell you something about activating our inner Moses. As you may know, last few days, I traveled in honor of my Jewish birthday and also to perform a wedding, officiate a wedding down in Florida. And I took the opportunity to visit as many people as possible what I call the Jewish birthday tour. And was to promote, to be blunt, to promote that everyone should know their Jewish birthday and why their birthday is so important. And the birthday is not about sulking about what they didn't get. I didn't get this and I didn't get that. A Jewish birthday celebrates not what we get, but what we give. Because the day that we were born means God trusted in us to make a difference in this world. Coming into this world just to take and to complain about others is not what we're here for. We're here to make a difference, to be that little Moses. On our birthday, and my Jewish birthday is the day before Moses, his on the 7th, mine's on the 6th of the same month. it reminds us to wake up, activate our own little Moses inside of us. Let me tell you a story. A young man, a member of the Chabad community in a Western Europe country, would disappear once a month. Nobody knew where he went and what he did. Despite becoming increasingly inspired by and involved in his Jewish observance, he always wore a troubled expression. One day he confided in his rabbi. Rabbi, he says, I'm very conflicted. I must tell you where I go during my monthly disappearances. I have a relationship that I'm not proud of. A relationship with someone I shouldn't be with. Someone not of my background. I know that the Torah forbids this, but I can't end it. It's killing me. I'm conflicted. I don't know what to do. The rabbi, feeling empathetic but uncertain how to advise the struggling man, said, I really don't have an answer for you, but I can tell you someone who does. Try the Rebbe. So I recommend you go to New York, visit the Rebbe, and ask him what to do. At first, the man was reluctant, but his conflict got the best of him. He traveled to New York and briefly told the Rebbe his story. He was fully prepared for the Rebbe to proverbially hit him over the head with a frying pan, because how else could a rabbi respond to such a confession? Anticipating a stern response, the man braced himself for rebuke. Instead, the Rebbe looked at him with warm, loving eyes and said, My friend, I'm envious of you. All of us are searching, always trying to find what is expected of us. What does God want from me? What should I be doing now? What is my purpose? I envy you because you know exactly what you need to do. You have a test before you and know exactly what is expected. This is Moses. This is Moses bringing out the quality of leadership that each and every one of us have. Uplifting and reminding us, whatever it is that we're facing in life, we know exactly what to do. Tap into that Moses within ourselves. Therefore, as we come from commemorating the birthday and the yahrzeit of Moses, the greatest teacher who ever lived, let's commemorate it by internalizing the message of the portion of Tetzaveh. This is one portion, as I mentioned, that omits his name. May we all become leaders that we have the potential to be. And may we merit to welcome the era of Mashiach, when we will be reunited with all of our great leaders, beginning with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, with Moses at the forefront. May it happen speedily in our days. Amen. I want to say a special welcome to Dr. Ilana Kastner. Unbelievable, doctor. We wish you a speedy recovery. I also want to say that Dr. Klashevsky brought to my mind the famous words. We talk about Moses. When you look at the epitaph or the monument of Moses Maimonides, buried in Tiberias in Israel, north of Israel, the Rebbe once pointed out that he's the only monument that has those words, Mimoshe ad Moshe lokom kamoshe. From Moses, that we're talking about today, to the Moses Maimonides, there's nobody as great as Moses. Nobody disagrees. Usually in Jewish life, there's always a complaint there. Wow, this is how can you say, what are you talking? You don't mean it. Here, nobody in the world disagrees with this. There's a direct relationship between Moses, our teacher, and Moses Maimonides, and that is the reason it's so special, these words. Let's move on, my friends. Thank you so much for that. And I'm really enjoying seeing the wonderful comments. by so many people, and I'm sure everybody on the radio as well. Special hello to you. Thank you for joining us. Now, obviously you can see that I'm very animated by this portion because it's my bar mitzvah portion. And in the portion, again, it continues to speak about the instructions of building the tabernacles. In our synagogue, we have a very distinguished lady. Her name is Kayla Kalmanson. And she asked a very beautiful question. I wonder if you have an answer, the audience. The command of building the Mishkan, building these tabernacles, which eventually warped into the first temple, the second, and we look forward to the third temple with the coming of Mashiach in Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount. What would have happened if there was no sin of a golden calf? If you look very carefully, it seems that as a follow-up to the sin of the golden calf, we were told, okay, you want to put your energies into something? Build yourself a Mishkan. The question is, what would have happened if there was no mistake? Would we still have a temple with all of its involvements, all of its activities? It's a good question, and there's a good answer to it. The answer is like this, my friends, and the answer isn't blowing in the wind. The answer is that even if there hadn't been that sin, the concept of having a model location of absolute holiness, of integration of heaven and earth, of all the things that the temple represented, is something that continues to this very day. Understand the following. One of the most important aspects of Jewish life is centered, grounded in Mount Sinai. No observance, no reflection must ever be, in a sense, truncated, separated from Mount Sinai. But it was a one-time event. It happened over a couple of days. Thunder and lightning and God speaking and all the things. I'm sure everybody saw the movie, the Ten Commandments. I read the book. But how was there to continue such an excitement, to take that into the future? So the sages tell us like this, that all of our synagogues, all of our temples, on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, is a replica of Mount Sinai. When a person goes to shul, they are bringing themselves front row and center. Just like the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, every Shabbos you read the Torah. There's a bima, there's an ark, there's a curtain. The main building, or so to speak, the main outlay of a synagogue is a replica of the Mishkan. But it's also there to relive the Mount Sinai experience, so that every day, every moment of our life, we feel like we're at that moment. So even if there had not been any sins to cause upon a building, for that reason, there still would have been, and there still is, the continuation of holy locations. Not so much just simply another temple, but every temple is a continuation of the Mount Sinai experience. So put that into your pipe, if you still do that, and smoke it. So Parshas Tetzaveh continues the instructions of the building of the Mishkan and all of its accoutrements. Chief amongst them is the inner altar, which sits in the sanctuary and is used for holy ketores, the burning of the incense every single day. This contrasts with the altar described in last week's portion that was made of copper. That was located on the courtyard. And that's where they got that, Marriott courtyard by Marriott. Located in the courtyard and used for animal offerings. Regarding the outer altar, there's a fascinating Talmud that speaks about it at the end of the tractate Gittin. It says the following: Whoever divorces his first wife, the altar sheds tears over him. That is, after 90 pages of a tractate devoted almost exclusively to the painful laws of divorce, it ends with an emotional appeal about divorce. Do everything in your power to avoid it. Although the Torah prescribes divorce as a remedy when absolutely necessary, indeed, when necessary, it constitutes one of the 613 mitzvahs. Divorce is nevertheless tragic. The altar itself weeps over the severing of the bonds between husband and wife, and of course the shattered hearts left in its devastating wake. What does this mean, though? Tragic as divorce may be, since when does an altar have tears, or eyes, or feelings for that matter? We have heard of the wailing wall, but the wailing altar? Moreover, even assuming we can apply emotions to the temple vessels, it seems odd that the altar, of all things, is the most sensitive to divorce. After all, the altar is a rather rough place. It's a repository of blood and fats, a place where animals are burned, offered by people to atone for what they often are crazy sins. If temple vessels are feelings, the altar, it would seem, is the toughest of them all. Perhaps it would make more sense that if, God forbid, a couple gets divorced, the cherubim atop the holy ark, formed like male and female, and representing the loving union between man and God, reflected in the union of man and wife, they would be shedding tears over the destruction of the union. Or perhaps if we said that the menorah lamps, which symbolize peace, love, and illumination, were extinguished from the sorrow and pain. I understand that, but why the altar? Why does the Talmud give this metaphor of the altar crying? There's an old joke that comes to mind. A couple on the verge of divorce comes to the rabbi, who warns them of the gravity of what they're about to do. Think very carefully before you do this, he says, because when a couple divorces, the altar cries. The woman ruefully replies, "Look, I've been crying for 30 years. Now let the altar have a turn." Okay, don't laugh at the same time, everybody, please. So, I want to say thank you to Sharon Jacobs and Lavana and Miriam Odell David. And we have Julianne Wallach. Thank you so much. I heard a beautiful explanation of the altar's divorce-induced tears. In the name of a very, very great rabbi who lived in Kfar Chabad. His name was Rabbi Meir Ashkenazi. And he said the following. He was the rabbi in the city of Shanghai between 1926 and 1949. But then he took up and helped all the Jewish refugees during that time. And then he eventually moved to New York. He was a very highly respected person. And in Crown Heights, there was a big fight going on between husband and wife. And they were on the verge of divorce. And the Rebbe asked this Rabbi Ashkenazi, try to mediate between them. And he managed to restore peace between this distinguished family. Afterwards, the Rebbe at the Farbrengen summoned this rabbi and asked him, how did he manage to win over the couple? And he replied that he used the explanation of the Gemara, which the Rebbe appreciated. He said like this, it says, whoever divorces his first wife, even the altar sheds tears over him. Meaning, really, he was metaphorically speaking, all the vessels of the sanctuary are crying. What does the Gemara mean, even? Even the hardened altar, even the vessel so accustomed to all kinds of troubles, all kinds of situations, animals turning into ash and blood spraying around here, even it cannot remain indifferent to the tragedy of divorce. Even it cannot help but cry when it sees the broken hearts of former, beloveds, or the specter of parents becoming distant from children, or children becoming forced to choose one parent over the other. It's a rather poetic take on the Gemara. But at the end of the day, the Gemara doesn't actually say even the altar to include everything. It says the altar sheds tears without the word even. Therefore, according to the literal, the simple understanding, the question remains, why would the altar of all of the temple vessels be so particularly sensitive to the tragedy of divorce? And the answer is like this. This is a majestic idea brought into the writings of the British. Again, I mentioned the British Chief Rabbi, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, and he quotes this in the name of his predecessor, who I remember, Chief Rabbi Emanuel Jacobovitz. It is a take on marriage and divorce that aligns well with the deeper understanding of the Mizbeach's, this altar's core function. What is the purpose of this Mizbeach? Offerings, sacrifices. Very often the main cause of a divorce is not any issue, but a deeper and broader problem, and that is the fear of sacrifice, the fear of offering up that which you hold dear. We are afraid to put our ego aside to make the space necessary for another person. This is problematic in any relationship, but even more in the bond between husband and wife. The word sacrifice may raise in some minds the image of weakness, loss, misery. Today, in a world of obsessive preoccupation with self, one forced to make a sacrifice may be viewed as one who must learn to stick up for himself and grow a backbone. But the service of the altar, perhaps the core function of the whole temple, the Mishkan and later on the temples, the key was the sacrifices. The truth is that there is no better and more effective way to grow beyond one's own finite self than by putting oneself aside and making sacrifices for others and for a greater cause. The surest way to transcend one's own limitations is to offer them to a higher purpose. When a person sacrifices, they're not losing anything, God forbid. It is rather a miraculous opportunity to gain by rising above oneself. The altar cries when a couple divorces because it, the world capital of sacrifice, intimately knows more than anyone and anything how tragic it is when this wonderful opportunity to offer oneself on the altar of selflessness is not only lost, but corrupted and turned into an engine of pain and brokenness. Instead of two souls uniting in the most sublime union, each went their separate ways in disappointment and aggravation. You know, in Chabad, Hasidic thought frequently cites a teaching in the name of the Holy Tana, Rabbi Nechonia ben Hakana. He was one of the early sages of the Mishnah, an early scholar of Kabbalah. He's the one who is the accepted composer of the beautiful piyut on the Bechayach, and also the author of the Sefer HaBahir, one of the earliest Kabbalistic texts. And he asks, why is it a sacrifice? Why is it called Karban? I hope I'm saying it right, Doctor. Karban. Yom Kippur. Why is it called a Karban? Because it brings close. Far from an expression of helplessness and loss, Karban comes from the root word karev, closeness. Sacrifice is what brings a person closer. In the context of the temple, one willingly offers up of his animalistic nature and desires, represented in the animal he offers on the altar. and with the thick beastly covering gone, the heart of an erstwhile sinner returns. Come close, is Mekarev, Miloshin Karban, to Hashem. In the context of a relationship, I like Robert Rosenberg is making me laugh all the way to the bank. In the context of a relationship, and especially a marriage, Korban is the secret agent that brings real closeness. Ki karov elecha, for it is close to you, and intimacy between the couple. In a very practical sense, sacrifice is the very basis of a couple's compatibility. It means to see and recognize the other person and value them. It means to make the other person feel wanted, needed, and important to the degree that is worth offering up, sacrificing my own time, my own desires, or my own habits to accommodate them and draw close to them. So much has been written on the question of what is love. What is it that binds two people together, moves them to give up their individuality, to live a life where someone else is invading their space? If you get down to it, the truth is not so selfish or selfless. It is in fact quite self-serving. Love is feeling that I myself can be more successful and more whole by becoming one with someone else. One loves a person with whom they believe they can become greater. As the Maharal of Prague explains, wherever one thinks, desires something that is its opposite, it is in order to become completed by that thing. And because it is completed by that thing, it becomes one with it. I want to say a special shout out to Patty Fuchs. Shavua Tov, thank you, from Wayne and Patty. Thank you so much. Jonathan Wolf is with us. Fantastic. Unbelievable. So, the idea is beautiful. This is the pact forged between a husband and wife. It is the resolute decision to build a life together. It is a resolution, a decision to build a life together, more than providing for one another, or cooking, or changing the light bulbs, taking out the garbage, or taking the kids to school. Above all, it is about creating a place where each spouse can be greater and more complete than they are on their own. When, God forbid, a couple tragically fails to make that space for one another, the marriage, heaven forfend, God forbid, begins to break. Marriages are destroyed when one feels that they have not become greater, maybe even feeling smaller because of their spouse. The Torah places the responsibility on a husband to provide his wife with she'er, kesus, va'ina, which translates clothing, food, and marital intimacy. The Tzemach Tzedek offers a profound insight into the word ona. Ona is related to the word answering, which is recited at different times. Ya'anenu v'yom korenu. May he answer us on the day we call. The man's main obligation is ona, to answer his wife's call, to be there for her. Literally speaking, intimacy is called ona, or time, because the obligation by definition is timely, depending on very defined cycles and intervals. Therefore, the altar cries when a couple divorces, God forbid, because it knows better than anyone and better than anything why the marriage broke down. Husband and wife may have many excuses for their behavior, and therapists may have all kinds of scholarly analysis of what went wrong. But at the end of the day, it boils down to the failure to put oneself aside to be able to see the needs and the wants of someone else. This failure is sad indeed, because sacrifice is to give more than you get, and to still know that you've gained more than you have ever given. Yes, you diminish yourself, but you have doubled. The story is told of a tzaddik, righteous man, going for a stroll in the forest where he met a group of lumberjacks downing the trees. He noticed that one worker had his trunks lined up closely, packed together, the trunks of the trees lined up together, while the others didn't. And the worker explained the tree trunks have protrusions and sharp edges sticking out of them. All the other lumberjacks try to smooth the protrusions, but you can never really straighten them. So the trunks clash with each other. They cannot be packed together. But I have a different method, he said. When I see a protrusion on a trunk, I carve a notch in the trunk next to it. This way, all the trunks fit into each other perfectly, and I can merge them into a straight row. Marriage and offering a korban, a sacrifice, on the altar teaches us that sometimes less is much, so much more. When trying to bring together two trees, two living people, don't trim down another's protrusions, another's pokey branches. Rather carve a space in oneself to embrace them completely. This explains a famous question of King Solomon, the wisest of all men. He sums up his marriage advice in 2 verses. In Mishlei, he says, Matza isha, matza tov. One who finds a wife has found goodness. If you have found a wife, you have all the good in the world, and you need nothing else. But if you look in Ecclesiastes, in Koheles, he says the opposite, exact opposite. Matza ani mar mimaves esa isha. I find the woman more bitter than death. Hello, what's going on over here? Marriage is worse than death. Death is quick, but marriage can go on for decades. So how do you reconcile these glaring contradictions? The question is even more complicated. The Talmud states that in Israel, on a man's wedding day, they would ask him this question, matzah or motze? That is, which verse did you experience? Matzah, one who found a wife that has found goodness? Or motze, I find a woman more bitter than death? It's a curious thing. Why would they ask a person such a troubling question at the most joyous occasion of his life, on his wedding night? They're not asking a question, but giving the young man an important insight. Now, on your wedding day, when you've started to build your new life, you should know that which verse will you experience is up to you. One kind of husband has found a wife. He recognizes that there's another person in this world, in his house. He didn't marry himself, but he's someone else. And she is a woman. She is different than he is. She has her own personality, her own way of doing things, her own sensitivities and way of thinking and appreciating things. And he decides to devote himself to her good. Sometimes it will be easier, sometimes harder. But this husband remembers his commitment to place her at the center of his life always. If he finds a woman and recognizes her as such, he will find good. But the more you give, the more you get. If you focus on truly making her happy, then you will be happy together. But the other kind of husband says, I find. All he finds is himself. I find. He's looking for someone to take care of him. After his mother has gotten tired of arguing with him and putting up with his shtick, if this is his approach, he and his new wife will soon find themselves pulling in opposite directions, creating a devastating wreckage that is worse than death, God forbid. As valuable as this insight might be, it's not easy to implement. Where does one find the courage to sacrifice? Some might say that the risk is not worth the effort. Why not just remain single? God forbid. Here the Rebbe offers a compelling and enlightening case for making sacrifices in marriage. A common approach to get couples to go beyond themselves is to tell them to think about the children, think about the future, think about the ramifications, and so on. But the Rebbe represents a completely different element to focus on. Don't focus on things outside of you, because the marriage is you. Hashem created your souls as two halves to be united as one. And that means He believes in you as a couple. The fourth of the 7 Sheva Brachos, or Sheva Brachot, recited at the chuppah and subsequent celebrations is, Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, who created man in His image and prepared him for him from His own self, an everlasting edifice. Blessed are you, Yotzer Adam. When we really stop to think about and understand this, we find that the strength hidden within us that empowers us to overcome the obstacles and truly be selfless is marriage. And that's why we say the two of them. We say they were under the chuppah. What are the famous words that the man says? Hariyat Mekadesh li Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, according to the laws of Moses and Israel. And the 7 blessings are recited at the chuppah. We use God's name, God's blessing them, and placing upon them the greatest opportunity as husband and wife. And that's what they're looking forward to build under the chuppah. This is true happiness as they move forward in marriage. So, about a year ago, this important concept of going beyond oneself, true sacrifice, not about oneself, what more we gain, is something that's very important and should be emphasized at marriages under the ceremony. That the husband and wife are to be two of the same souls, two halves of the same soul. The only reason why there is an attraction between the husband and wife, between men and women, at that stage of their life, before they get married, is to reveal that inner connection between the two of them. And that's also part of that life. But ultimately, it's two halves of the same soul. Each one complements each other in the most beautiful, beautiful manner. So, just to conclude very briefly, about a year and a half ago, there was a terrible accident near the Shamgar funeral home in Jerusalem. A bus driver lost control of his vehicle and slammed into a group of people at a bus stop. Tragically, one woman and her 2 daughters were killed on the spot. Another young woman, who was just 6 months earlier had married the son of the Jewish music composer Hillel Peli, was severely injured, losing both legs and remaining in a coma for many long days. When the young woman awoke and learned of her condition, she asked her husband a grim question in her great pain. Tell me the truth. If you had known in advance that this would happen to me, would you have married me? No school or yeshiva had prepared the young man for such a question. He thought about it for a while before replying as follows. Obviously, if this had happened when you were younger, I would not have chosen to marry you. A healthy boy doesn't typically marry a woman without legs. But this accident happened after we got married, after we established our home, and therefore the accident happened not to you, but to us. This tragic but moving story sums up a marriage founded on a strong foundation. One gives up part of themselves to become part of a greater whole. In marriage, it is not I, but we. And those wise enough to live by this reap the benefits of a sacred union as prescribed by the Holy Torah. This is my thoughts for today, coming from a beautiful wedding of or chasna and kala, bride and bridegroom, and they asked me for some last-minute advice before they went to the chuppah, and I said was very, very important. Women like to be cherished, and men like to be, in a certain sense, validated. Think about that, my friends. Each one of us have our specialties, but together it makes for a beautiful, beautiful marriage. May Hashem bless all those who've just got married, or about to get married, all of us who are married, to have happy marriages. And I want to say a special hello to Joan Clapper, who's watching us from, I think, from Boca Tov to Boca Raton, and to everybody out there, wishing everybody a good week, a safe week, and good news all around. Shalom, everybody.